the meeting to order. Roll call.
Mr. Bishop,
Excused.
Ms. Duval. Here. Mr. Lazo.
Here.
Dr. Page.
Present.
Ms. Peliquin.
Present.
Mr. Thomo.
Present.
Mr. Wang.
Present.
6 present, 1 excused.
We have a quorum. Moving on to agenda item number 2, Pledge of Allegiance and flag. Moving on to the next agenda item 3, public input. Is there anybody from the public that would like to address the Southbridge School Committee? There is nobody that would like to speak to the school committee. We'll move on to discussion of minutes, November 1st, 2016, regular. Do we have any additions, corrections, or deletions to those minutes? If not, moving on to chairperson's announcements. Got a couple of things. First of all, I'd like to thank the Southbridge Pioneers and the football team, cheerleaders, and the band. I attended the game, and not only did the score come out right and Southbridge won, what was very impressive was the turnout of the Southbridge parents, administration, and various people dressed in red and white. I walked into the field, and there was nobody on the other side. It was sparse. But when you looked at the Southbridge side, it seemed like the spirit and the support was on the Southbridge side. The boys responded to it, and they won the game, and I congratulate all of them. It was quite a production with the band and the cheerleaders and everybody there. I also went next door to the local pub and gave my deepest sympathy to all the Bartlett alumni. Being an alumni of Southbridge, bought them a drink and said I'm sorry for their loss. That's what they do to us when they come to Southbridge, so I figured I'd reciprocate. I was a gentleman about it, and they were fantastic. They took it like champs. I'd just like to move on to I got 2 other issues. One, I'd like to congratulate Donald Trump on being our newly elected president. I'd like to comment on a few things that, one, we all have to remember we're Americans first, and Democrats, Republican, undeclared second. I think that this election was kind of volatile, and at times we wished it ended quicker, sooner than later. But I never lost a friend or never made a foe because of something like an election. But what startled me was I was hoping that maybe our school district could embrace this as an education of civics, so to speak, more at the middle high school, maybe some mock elections and stuff like that, and to understand what the electoral vote is. What is the majority vote? And various other parts of it. But I was hearing that people weren't allowed to talk about the newly elected president, and for various reasons, and I was kind of disheartened by it, because I think what we have to do is keep our spirit and our vision correct on that election. If Hillary Clinton won, I still would have sat there. I'm a Democrat. I would have said, geez, it's 4 years with Hillary Clinton. We go to work. We go to work no matter who wins the election. Put the emotions on the sideline and worry about our community. If this gentleman's slogan is to get rid of Common Core on the education front and give home rule to the states, I'm in favor of it. If he turns around and says, make America great again, as you can see, I wear the hat. He is my president. I'm an American first, and I will support my president, as I did the last one and the one before that. So, with that in mind, the country has a road to hoe. We have a bigger road to hoe in Southbridge. Hopefully that we can get help from the state and from the feds, but I think we have to roll up our sleeves with a good work ethic, with some qualified people to get the job done. One last thing, I'd like to wish everybody in the town of Southbridge and in our school district a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. The holiday is upon us. Thanksgiving is in the rearview mirror, and Christmas is up with New Year's. And I think that, the system, the kids, this is a very festive time in the town of Southbridge where we celebrate the holidays. So let's all have a very happy holidays. Thank you. Moving on to the high school representative, the announcement.
So, first things first, I want to talk about the transition between administration from last year to this year. I believe this year has been remarkable. I believe Dr. Townsville, Mr. Danby and them, providing every student with an ambition to actually apply to colleges and do well and actually participate in school and everything. Last year, I never really had that motivation to strive for success, and I got to thank them for actually putting me in this position. I'm very grateful. So back to this. We had Spirit Week, Would You Be My Friend? Next day, Hawaiian, the American and Class Shirt Wars. We had a pep rally. There was a lot of competition, such as dances, races, and sketches. Each class performed a skit, had a Disney theme where there was a sketch day where each class was to design a theme based on their, a poster based on their theme. There was a paint night, which was really well attended, and they were chosen to paint their poster. There was a bonfire, and then there was the Thanksgiving Day football game, which we won, which I said last time that we're gonna seek victory through that defeat, and like I said, we did. So congratulations to the football team and even everybody that was there. Now, on report cards, there was a new policy that was introduced, the failure due to attendance policy, which a lot of students were confused about it until Mr. Danby explained it. Basically, if you miss 7 days of school, 7 days of class, you're gonna get a FA, which pretty much means you're gonna need to, next quarter, you're gonna need to actually do well in the next marking period and actually show up, and that can clear off. Now, if you were failing and had a failure due to attendance on your report card, you could redeem yourself by going to credit recovery and attending class the next marking period. Now, about the flight program, we received a grant for 5 flight simulators and a partnership with QCC for career pathway like healthcare, manufacturing, and technology. And that pretty much wraps it up.
Thank you.
Very nice.
Thank you.
Any questions? If there are no questions, moving on to the receiver's announcements. Madam Receiver.
Thank you, Chairman Lazo. Good evening, everyone. I want to update the community on a couple of different items. First, our turnaround plan progress. The Superintendent's Roundtable is going to meet on Thursday. This is going to be our second meeting, and I just want to welcome and thank Mr. Wang for being the representative from the school committee on the Superintendent's Roundtable. The goals of the Superintendent's Roundtable is essentially to develop core values for the district and also do some progress monitoring of our turnaround plan and ensuring that we're meeting our benchmarks. The Superintendent's Roundtable is made up of a variety of stakeholders, community members, students. We have parents, we have teachers, we have administrators, school committee representatives. So it's a wide variety of individuals that have a vested interest in the Southbridge Public Schools and us succeeding in completing the benchmarks of our turnaround plan. We're also beginning the monitoring site visits to oversee the implementation of the turnaround plan with the state. We have begun the extended day planning process. Next year, we're looking to extend the school day in grades K through 8, as well as the implementation of a new compensation model that will really innovate and provide us a clear pathway to recruit and retain high-quality teachers in the district. And we'll be discussing that more as the budget process rolls out and discussing it with the school committee. We've also begun looking into the development of a secondary redesign committee to create new college and career pathways and options and choices at Southbridge High School, beginning at the middle level. And that secondary redesign discussion and committee will start in January. The receiver's review process was rolled out today, and the receiver's review is essentially an accelerated timeline for improvement for staff who have been identified as underperforming in the classroom, or any ancillary staff that we feel is in need of accelerated improvement. And that process begun today, and we're also starting the professional development and support that goes along with that beginning this Saturday. Notable school events, we have been building walkthroughs, really focusing on instruction, providing feedback to staff. We did instructional rounds at the high school, and today at the faculty meeting, they disaggregated all of that data and really began to process how to go about improvement of instruction at the high school. The special education coordinated program review has been begun by the state. We're going to be getting the findings soon. We also did a special education audit through EDC last spring. The final report has been given to the district, and we will be presenting it to the school committee, the findings and the recommendations. We hope to plan a joint meeting, community meeting, to discuss the findings of the special education audit, and we'll be sending a full report to the school committee prior to that for your review. Very excited. The Dual Language Committee has been really working hard planning for the rollout of our new dual language program next year. They have done site visits to schools. They did a full conference in Arizona. And a lot of great information is coming. We're putting together a flyer and an information session for families, and that will be announced in the upcoming months, and you will hear more about that during the budget process. The literacy leadership team, I know that members of the committee have asked what we're doing to improve literacy in the district. We have a district-wide literacy leadership team that is working on improvements around literacy, instruction, and developing tiered systems of support for the entire district. And that team actually met on Monday, and we're starting the implementation process of RTI at the elementary level. Great. I just want to echo the great ending to the football season with the Thanksgiving Day win over Bartlett High School. I want to thank Coach Kumanellis, all the staff, the students who went out, the band. And I also just want to give a big shout out to Jose Morales, who was the MVP of the game. He did an amazing job, and it was well-deserved recognition. Our professional development has been outstanding this year. November 4th, we had 9 targeted sessions for professional development for all staff. We had the University of Pittsburgh come in and work with all humanities teachers in grades 6 through 12. The Skillful Teacher starts this Saturday, and that will be 6 sessions, 6 full Saturdays, or 12 afternoon sessions that teachers can choose to take that course, and we're very excited about the launch of that. Other information, we're starting a policy review committee to begin looking at all the school committee policies. I want to thank Ms. Peliquin for being the school committee representative on that committee. And it was a great opportunity for me to spend time at the MASS Joint Conference with Mr. Wang and Ms. Peliquin, Ms. Duval, and Mr. Bishop. That was a really, really fun time. Thank you for attending with me. And we had a recent meeting with the police and fire chiefs, and we're going to be doing some follow-up on safety and security at the schools with them, but that was a really great meeting. We also extended an offer to a new payroll manager who will also cover benefits and human resources, and I'll be sending that name to you in your next update. And just really quickly, recent gifts to the district. We received a donation from Holy Trinity Church for school supplies at the West Street School, and we got a donation from Ocean State Job Lot of over 10,000 Spanish language books for our English language learners. So I want to thank the Holy Trinity Church and Ocean State Job Lot for their generosity. And I just want to wish everyone a happy holiday this holiday season. And I just want to thank the staff of the Southbridge Public Schools for the tremendous work that they have undertaken as a part of this turnaround and the dedication that they've shown to the students and families on a daily basis, and the entire administrative team for all the tremendous work in overseeing the rollout of an incredible amount of initiatives this fall. I just want to thank everyone, and also just extend my sincere thanks to the families, community members, and members of the school committee for the dedication and support that you've shown us as we've begun the turnaround process here in Southbridge.
Thank you. Any questions? If there are no questions, we'll move on to agenda item number 8, new business. At this time, would like to take a moment to have a motion to waive the rules to change 8A and put 8B first due to some time restraints.
So moved.
There's a motion. Do I hear a second? Second. There's a motion and a second. All those in favor? Opposed? Thank you. Next up, social emotional learning update, Ms. Nikki Murphy.
Good evening, members of the committee. My name is Nikki Murphy. I am the Director of Social and Emotional Learning. And we're going to give you an update tonight. I'm going to start, and then our Director of the Alternative Programs is going to come up next to speak specifically about that part of what's going on with the SEL department. So, do I have to use this, John? John, how do I do this? It's like, do I have to use that?
You can use this here. Just use that side. Okay.
Yeah, but it won't go.
Top.
Where? Which one?
These arrows.
Oh, these ones. Okay, cool. Thank you. So as I spoke about probably about 6 months ago, it's important to kind of conceptualize what's happening in the SEL department by looking at the work that we're doing on 3 levels. This is part of MTSS, the Multi-Tiered Systems of Supports. Thank you. And this is the framework from which we operate from. So you're basically looking at a 3-tiered model of behavioral and academic supports. Usually in the bottom of the triangle, we see about 80% of our students that get universal interventions. And then about 15% in the middle at Tier 2 get targeted interventions. And at the top, there's usually about 5%. Those are typically your kids that are on IEPs, and they get intensive interventions and programming. So just keep that in mind as we kind of move through the presentation. The district-wide SEL initiatives that we're focused on this year are implementing these 3-tiered systems of supports that looks at programming, curriculum, and interventions. The framework that we use is called PBIS, that's Positive Behavioral Interventions and Supports. The curriculum we've chosen is Positive Action, which is basically to help students acquire SEL skills, social-emotional learning skills. And we're also looking at making some changes to the way discipline has been handled in the district. And that model that we're going to be introducing, and we've already begun to introduce, is called restorative justice. I think something that's important to note about restorative justice, what people do know about it, they often think it's a therapeutic model, which it is, but it still holds students accountable, and it does not mean that we do away completely with things like detention or in-school suspension. It just means that we no longer take really like a unilateral approach to how we respond to human behavior. So some of the behaviors that we see in the school system are a result of things like addiction, poverty, mental health issues at home, and therefore, when we have that increased kind of understanding of human behavior, that comes sort of the need, brings about the need for like a multidimensional approach to discipline and behavior. So just a few brief updates on all of these 3 tiers. This is what we either have already done, it is well underway, and or some things that we're in sort of the beginning stages of. We started off the year with doing extensive professional development for both building level administration and staff on those 3 initiatives that I just mentioned. We formed a district school climate team that is comprised of myself. There are some staff members, but it's predominantly building level administrators. And this group of administrators are tasked with basically helping to implement all the SEL initiatives throughout the district in each of their schools. Recently, we were awarded a grant, the 320 grant, which is allowing us to do this partnership with Bay Path. So the partnership with Bay Path will allow us to this year choose 15 seniors who are going to, after school, they will get a Southbridge diploma, but after school, 3 days a week from January to May or June, they will go to Bay Path and they will choose to be trained and certified in either culinary or machinery. So they will walk out of high school certified in one of those areas, ready to work, needing that certification in order to do so. We've just begun a partnership with Harrington Hospital, which the partnership's been going on for the 7 months that I've been here, but just begun to really start to develop what will be a school-based health clinic. Harrington Hospital has been an amazing partner to the school district in many ways, and I'll talk more about that in a minute. But one of the ways is that they are offering us a lot of free services to really try to provide wraparound services for students and their families in the district. So in the school-based health clinic, they're going to give us, for example, a free APRN, and that person will be able to do things like vaccinations. They'll be able to do wellness visits. They'll be able to bill out of the school, and it's an entirely no cost to the school. So that's pretty interesting. They'll also be able to administer psychiatric medications if they need to, because it's a person with a behavioral health background as well as being a medical professional. We are in the process of, we just received a grant, which is funding an intensive 2-day restorative justice training for 24 staff. So that we can really begin implementation. So we've done some preliminary restorative justice trainings throughout the district to start to try to help people see that there are alternatives to suspension. So for example, if a child is behaving a certain way, traditionally in the district, the response was, I see a behavior, and so that means the child needs ISS, without really any full understanding of, was the behavior due to something going on in the home, some kind of underlying mental health condition, a substance abuse issue, and therefore they need really support. In addition to, again, being held accountable for their behavior, but they need more than just an ISS or detention. That's not really going to solve the problem. So that is underway. We've begun additional professional development and classroom management strategies and de-escalation techniques. These are Tier 1 best practices to help teachers really feel like they're equipped to handle certain minor behaviors within the classroom setting. We have begun the positive action curriculum. It's being taught in grades K to 12. We have PBIS teams that are in all the schools. They're getting training, free training through DESE's PBIS Academy. We are piloting SWIS in 2 elementary schools, and SWIS is a data management system that will really allow us to track major behaviors, ODRs, office discipline referrals, in order to better understand the different behaviors in the district and then therefore what types of intervention plans we need to implement to help students. We have formed a wellness committee, and the wellness committee is tasked with several different initiatives for this year. The first is to look at the Youth Risk Behavior Survey, which I believe was last done in 2014, supposed to be done every couple of years. So they're going to be looking at that data and then also planning for the administration of the next Youth Risk Behavior Survey, which will give us some interesting data for the following school year. They're going to help support us in developing the health clinic. They are creating some crisis protocols throughout the district. We have crisis teams now throughout the district that have administration on them. They've been trained. They will continue to be trained. And a manual that will be standardized across the district for all the crisis teams will be developed partially by the Wellness Committee. Something I'm particularly proud of that I think is really important that the Wellness Committee is doing is beginning to work around issues to increase LGBTQ awareness. And there's going to be different things that we might do, for example, creating a GSA club, which is a Gay Straight Alliance club. All school districts throughout the nation have GSA clubs, but currently Southbridge does not. And you know, in our efforts to create an inclusive school climate and culture that treats all students with respect and dignity, I think that this is a very important initiative that we're working on. We're working with a consultant who is going to help improve our middle high school guidance programs, grades 6 to 12, through training and through consultation. They're going to help us develop scope and sequence. And we're beginning to, myself and Dr. Andre Townsell are going to be working on creating a high school advisory program, which will be up and running next year. In terms of Tier 2 and Tier 3, we've worked, so SBST teams are our Tier 2 intervention teams. That's when there are children with either academic or behavioral issues. They get referred to these school-based support teams. And in improving these teams, we've done things like increase membership, which will include administrators. And so all of the teams now have an administrator on the teams. And these teams are specifically working on improving their policies, their communication with teachers, the intervention plans that they put into place, the data collection procedures, et cetera. We have clinical staff, as you know, that we hired over the summer, and those staff are now conducting diagnostic evaluations and providing treatment for students that previously they were not getting. So typically in the district, what I saw when I came in was students who had mental health conditions, because there were not clinical staff in the district, they were essentially being assigned, traditionally on an IEP or even through a 504, they were being assigned a social skills group. That's not necessarily what's indicative of all of what their treatment intervention should be based on whatever their diagnosis is. So now it's very much individualized because we have clinical staff that can identify what the specific diagnostic issues are and the intervention needs. We just got a grant, Nellie Mae grant, which is going to allow us to bring in a consultant who's going to work with a select group of teachers at the middle school and high school around teaching them how to communicate really effectively. This is really kind of a tier 1 intervention, but it's very effective with tier 2 and tier 3 kids because it not only teaches them how to communicate effectively with them, but it allows them in doing so to reduce behavioral management, to increase behavioral management strategies, but to reduce behavioral incidents within the classroom setting. And we have an Upward Bound grant that we are in the process of writing with U Inc., which is one of our community partners. And the hope, if we get that grant, is that that program will come back to the district. We'll have it for at least 5 years through this grant, and that will begin in the fall. So Tier 3, we've created a new social emotional learning program at Charlton Street School. They previously did not have one. They had what's called a PASS program, which is a program that serves the ASD population, kids on the autism spectrum, but does not serve children who have all of the other mental health conditions, of which there are many. In addition, the existing Tier 3 SEL programs that we have district-wide, I've been providing training for the staff in those programs to create a more highly structured therapeutic model that is going to implement a lot of the different initiatives in the district, for example, restorative justice and clinical support into those existing programs. We have created a family resource center. It's almost up and running. This is at Eastford Road School. And in doing so, we've got the space actually physically set up at this point, pretty much. It's going to look a little better as we bring some more things in. But I have connected with a bunch of different community partners. So, for example, there's going to be somebody in there once a week who's going to provide fuel assistance and sign families up for fuel assistance. There'll be someone in there that Harrington Hospital, again, partnering with us, is going to give us a financial counselor to help families, set families up with Mass Health or other kinds of insurance. There's a, Harrington Hospital has a organization, part of their organization in town called Community Connections, and they're actually going to give us staff to staff this Family Resource Center at Eastford Road from 3 to 6. So our staff will staff it during the day and provide families with different supports they need, food, clothing, fuel assistance, like I said. But after hours, this person, and both actually staff that are going to come in are both Spanish speaking, which is obviously helpful for us so that we can service all families and children. And they are going to connect people with a bunch of different services within the community, but we're also partnering with U Inc., and they're providing us free therapeutic services to address specific needs that families have. For example, parents who are acting as grandparents, so there'll be a group like that. There'll be an addictions group, there'll be a trauma group. So we're forming those groups right now in our partnership with U Inc. We are working on, we're in the beginning phase of this, but really creating better therapeutic spaces within the schools that are not just attached to the Tier 3 programs, but spaces that are going to allow all students, when they're becoming escalated, to go into that space and through the support of clinicians, basically be able to get themselves back to baseline and then return to the general ed classroom setting. We've had some collaborative meetings recently, one with Psychiatric Emergency Services through Harrington, one coming up next week with DCF, and this is essentially to improve service delivery and communication between ourselves and these existing community agencies that notoriously, you know, kind of with all school districts, there can be a bit of a contentious relationship and a misunderstanding about what they do, what we do, and how we can collaborate together to best meet students' needs. So those are happening as well. Like I mentioned before, the crisis teams have been formed in all the schools. And finally, Southbridge Academy, I'm going to have my colleague, who's the director of alternative programs, come up and speak specifically about these alternative programs that are going to be opening up at the end of January. So that's all I have for right now. I don't know if you want to ask questions, if you want to have her come up and finish up and then ask questions of both of us.
Are there any questions at this time?
I had a couple.
Nikki, go ahead.
I just wanted to refer back to your pilot SWIS program in the two elementary schools. What sort of data are you collecting?
I'm sorry, I can't hear you very
What
well.
sort of data about behavior are you collecting in your pilot SWIS program?
In which program?
Swiss.
Swiss. Okay, so Swiss is a data management system that is directly aligned with PBIS. And so essentially what we do is we've separated out minor versus major behaviors. The minor behaviors are the behaviors that should be dealt with within the classroom setting. So through the trainings we're doing on classroom management and de-escalation techniques for teachers, they will be able to manage those minor behaviors. The major behaviors are the ones that require an office discipline referral that administrators deal with. Swiss is going to track all of the major behaviors, and it's aligned with what has to be reported out to the state as well, but we identified essentially what we see in the school. So we looked at all the data from what are the different behaviors that people have reported on in the past year or two. And then we created a form that goes into Swiss, and basically there'll be 1 or 2 people in each school. Well, we're going to pilot it just at Charlton Street and at West Street this year, and they will be tracking that data in order to see, all right, what are we looking at in terms of behaviors and what are the interventions that need to happen? Does that answer?
Yeah, it does. So what sorts of behaviors that you're currently tracking that you feel like are not being dealt with the way you want to see them yet at this point?
Not being dealt with.
Like in terms of implementing the restorative justice model over the previous model of school discipline?
Sure. So I would say that there's a vast improvement because we have clinical staff this year in understanding behaviors. There's extensive training that still needs to happen with the teaching staff. I think the administrators have had some training, and that can always be improved upon. We continue to train them, and we will. But until a lot of the teaching staff understand that when a child acts out a certain way, they're speaking to us, right? They're telling us something through their behavior. So for example, I think I used this example even last time when I spoke. Trauma is one of the most misunderstood disorders when somebody has PTSD, for example, post-traumatic stress disorder, because it manifests in many different ways. So for example, a child with PTSD can often look, there's a mood component to it, and they can be very anxious and depressed, and they can often look quiet, and they're not disruptive. So people tend to kind of ignore that a little bit. They might give them some treatment, but they don't see them as a behavioral kid. Versus other children with PTSD act out behaviorally. So say they've witnessed domestic violence in the home. They might act out by punching a wall. Well, that kid will be labeled behavioral. But the reality is they both are 2 children with a mental health condition that need treatment, right? So I don't know if that kind of answers your question, but that's basically when we look at those 2 different scenarios, we now have clinical staff that know what they're looking at in terms of what their behavior means and therefore what the appropriate intervention is. So rather than in the past a child punches a wall and an administrator not necessarily understanding what that meant might say emergency removal or suspension, now we know, okay, wait a minute, this child has PTSD, this child is acting out. Doesn't mean they're not accountable for their behaviors. So using the restorative justice model, since you brought that up, that's a great model to deal with a child that, say, has PTSD and punches a wall, because in that model, we're looking at feelings as much as we're looking at behavior, and we're looking at understanding why they punched the wall, and then we're looking at helping them restore justice to the community. So they would have to fix the wall. They would have to apologize. They would have to sit in a circle and have a conversation with the teacher or the other students that are around them that they affected by punching that wall. Maybe they scared some other kids, right? But it doesn't mean you immediately say, suspend the kid, because Dr. Townsend and I had this conversation the other day, and he always says something that I agree with 100%, which is you can suspend them, but they come back, and what happened in that suspension? Did they get any treatment? Did they get any support? Are they any better, or did they just lose time on learning, and now they're right back here without the skills? That's why we have a positive action SEL curriculum. That teaches them skills. Things like self-management is a huge thing, being able to manage your anxiety and anger. But restorative justice is a way to respond in a therapeutic way to a child who's acting out behaviorally, but is not acting out behaviorally in a way that requires necessarily detention or suspension. And restorative justice, by the way, when we fully integrate that model into the district, it's an option. So you say to the child and the family, you have an option to do restorative justice here and repair what you've done to the community and really learn from your behavior and learn how to not behave that way again. But if you decide you don't want to do that or your family says no, you can still get a detention or a suspension. You know, it's not like we're saying this is the only way to go. So it's kind of a progressive discipline model.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
On the same line of questioning,
Sure.
I understand that if the child acts out in the classroom, you have to address that problem, but to what cost of the rest of the class and the ones that are behaving are we willing to disrupt that class to correct that problem?
Right. That's the million-dollar question, right? That's a
Right.
tough question.
Because the parents that I get phone calls from, they don't quite know we're in receivership, so they call the school committee still, and they ask us, you know.
Yeah.
I send my child to school, there's an outburst, there's 2 or 3 kids having an issue, the whole class suffers.
Yeah.
And there's where the old model kicks in, where the old parents say, you know, get the problem away, and they talk about alternative programs. There's 100 different ways to handle it.
Right.
My question to you is, to what cost, at what point is it that the kids that want to learn are not taken, their education's not taken away from them?
Sure.
At the expense of the misbehaved child?
Sure. And I think it's a complex question. There's a lot of pieces to it, but the simplest answer I can give you that I think makes the most sense is that's why we have multi-tiered systems of support. So for example, when you're tracking, so a kid like that, right, is acting out in class and it's just disruptive to the other students. What happens then is he gets referred to that Tier 2 intervention, the SBST team. Okay? They begin to look at the behavior, they put together an intervention plan, they implement the intervention plan, data is collected to see if it's effective. When it isn't, and that's time sensitive, right? So we give that a couple of months to work. Sometimes you give it less than that, depends on how disruptive the child is, right? Sometimes at that Tier 2 level we say, you know what, we think there's an underlying mental health condition here. Let's have a clinician do a diagnostic evaluation and really thoroughly understand this. We also have board certified behavior analysts. They'll come in, they'll observe the student, they'll say, I think this is the function of the behavior. This is why they might be behaving this way. And based on all of that diagnostic and clinical information, that's how we form that intervention plan, right? When it doesn't work, okay, which is what you might be talking about, right? And when do we then say, all right, this is just too disruptive? That is often when a referral from the SBST team, which is Tier 2, is made to a Tier 3 program. And that's when they might move up to that tier because they need more intensive supports and they are disruptive in the classroom and also they're not getting their own needs met. So when you move them into a Tier 3 program that's more self-contained, they're allowed to get their education, they're allowed to get a lot more intensive behavior management and clinical support without it being as disruptive to other children.
Who makes the call? At what point if the child has to be taken, is the child taken out of the class to meet with the team on Tier 2?
You mean, do they join the SBST team?
Yes.
There are models that do that, and often when that is done, it tends to be more like the high school level, when the child is older and able to kind of be part of that conversation. Part of that conversation also often happens with parents, obviously. That's a part of the conversation. So I've worked in districts where parents came into the SBST teams and had the conversation with the team, and I'm fully support that because I think the parent obviously is the person who knows their child the most and can offer us a lot of information that we might not have. But yes, out of that team process, they will make the recommendation to say, I think that this child needs Tier 3 support. We've tried a million different interventions, none of them have been effective, and we can see through his behavior and or maybe a diagnosis that he got, or the child might be then referred for psych testing and be put on an IEP and then often moved into a Tier 3
Who makes the
program.
decision in the classroom whether the student stays, that's disrupting, or leaves that classroom at that moment? Or do they automatically stay?
Are you talking about, does the teacher make the call?
I don't know if it's the teacher, but if there's a behavioral problem in the classroom,
Right.
who makes a decision that child should be taken out of the classroom for the benefit of all?
I think it's different right now. So those are systems that we're trying to work out and put into place, so they're still in flux a little bit. But to give you some The teachers are now, because they're being trained on classroom management techniques and how to manage behaviors better in the classroom, and as they get better at doing that and understanding these are some minor behaviors that you really need to learn how to manage in your classroom and don't require an office discipline referral, meaning removal, right, from the class. As they get better at learning those techniques, then they will be able to manage a lot of those more minor behaviors. Like right now, some of what we're seeing are teachers, some teachers who don't know, they don't have the skills yet, and that's okay. We have to train them and continue to train them. And so they're sending kids out to administration and down to the office for really more minor behaviors that are things that once they have some proper training and support, they'll be able to manage better in the classroom. So I think it's different in different schools, but what we are moving towards in a classic kind of PBIS model is, and as we've already begun to do, train them on these are the minor ones, here's some techniques for how to deal with those minor ones, here are the major ones where it is now you as the teacher, we want you to make an office discipline referral because these are major behaviors that should be sent to the office and managed at that level.
Thank you. Go ahead.
I just wanted to expand upon Ms. Murphy's explanation about SWIS. SWIS is a really powerful data system that can help us track school-wide referral patterns. It can also help us to look at how often referrals are made, at what time during the day. It can help us disaggregate all of that information. It can also help us to track which students are being referred by subgroup. So do we have more students of color being referred to the office? Do we have a certain subgroup or students with disabilities are referred more often during the morning or afternoon so that we can actually create interventions for them? And then it also takes us down to the individual student level so that we can actually track behavior patterns of individual kids and identify what are the triggers during the day or what are the behavioral patterns of individual students so that we can more effectively provide targeted Tier 2 and Tier 3 interventions. So that's the power of a SWIS data system. Does that help?
Yeah, it does.
Thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Any other questions? Yes.
Is there any progress on a GSA administrator or somebody over there that can take over that?
Did you say, can you take over that?
No, I'm saying, have they found a teacher or anything?
So I know
Anybody
they
yet?
identified a teacher at the high school, and the last email exchange that I had with Dr. Townsend was the person just needs to look at like scheduling and figure out if there's a day, I think, right? Was that where we were at? Okay. We would have to pick a day that would work in that person's schedule, and then we can kind of send the message out and start to recruit and see if there's kids that want to join.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for your help, too.
You're
You've been
welcome.
Very good.
Any other questions?
What's
Thank
that? Okay, thank you.
Nice presentation, too, by the way.
Good evening. My name is Melanie Galante. I'm the director of the Alternative Program, which will be starting in January. We're very excited for that. We're actually starting at the beginning of the third quarter. We purposely designed this program to start halfway through the year, partially because we wanted to make sure that we had data and information on the students that are being referred to the program and that they meet the qualifications, which I'll go through later. The program is going to be housed at Cole Ave. We received a grant that allows us to have some funding to be able to start up the program and operational funding, which is very nice because even though it's a program at Southbridge Public Schools and not a sub-separate program, it allows us to be able to use the actual facility for various things for the students. What I mean is that eventually when we become 6 through 12, where we're centrally located allows us to be able to have better access to the community. We're already forming partnerships with the library and other area communities to be able to use those resources for our students. So we're really excited about the move to Cole Ave. This year, what we're looking at is we're looking at creating a program for grades 6 through 10. We're going to be opening up 3 classrooms. These classrooms will have no more than 12 students per classroom, so the maximum student enrollment for this year would be 36. The way that the classes will be broken down would be a 6-7 classroom, a 7-8 classroom, and then a 9-10 classroom. And then next year, we would be opening up the 4th and final classroom, which will house older students, 16 and over. The reason why we've designed it this way is because we have what's called the 48-month age gap And this way here, if we have students that are older, say an 18 or 19-year-old or 17-year-old in ninth grade, it allows them to go into that classroom and meet their educational needs within that school environment and be able to access the curriculum effectively. The way that we do this, I'll explain that in a little bit and how we can make that model work. Our staffing is going to remain small. It's myself. We have a clinician that's being supported by Harrington Hospital, and we're really excited about that because, again, as Nikki spoke, we have that direct connection within the community, and we'll be able to more effectively meet the students' needs and be able to have better access for outside services as inside services for our students. We have core content teachers. We will be following the Mass State curriculum and the Common Core. A special education teacher to support our special education students. Support staff, meaning we're hiring 2 educational assistants this year to be able to support the students, and service providers to meet the ELL and special education needs for the students. Again, this is really important. This is a voluntary, non-special educational program. It'll be a mixture of students from all backgrounds that meet the criteria, which I'll go over in a few minutes. So the criteria, again, as Nikki spoke, she talked about the different levels of tiers. This is a Tier 3 program, and this program will be housing students that meet these criteria and have had other opportunities within the tiered programs that Nikki spoke about earlier. At risk of dropping out, being retained is another key component, or at risk of grade retention. We're currently looking at students that are not effectively accessing the curriculum this year and have the potential to possibly be retained this year. So coming in mid-year, it allows them the opportunity to continue making progress within their grade level. And what's awesome about this program, which I'll talk about in a minute, is if for some reason they do not, say, complete the criteria for the grade for this year, it doesn't mean that they're retained. What it means is they start off where they left off the following year, and as soon as they meet those requirements, they're able to move on within the curriculum. A high absentee rate, and as you know, in the town of Southbridge, there are different ways we can look at this. We have students that are just absent. We have students that are at school refusal. We have students that sometimes will go to another country for a few months and then return back, and so they have some skill gaps within their education and other extenuating circumstances. We're looking at students that are at home right now being tutored that may be able to access this program where it's in a smaller environment. We talked about high number of disciplinary issues. It's not the one and only component to this. I don't want this to be viewed particularly as a behavioral program. Sometimes the term alternative programming represents that. It's not just exclusively that, but we will take kids with that as well as kids in court involvement. Skill gaps. One of the things that the turnaround plan talks about is the problem with MCAS passing, numeracy, literacy, and the low scores. This will allow students that have skill gaps that are well below grade level to be able to not only meet grade level curriculum, but also fill in those gaps that they may have to be able to succeed, not only in MCAS, but in regular content curriculum. And then again, as Nikki spoke about, we will be having a therapeutic model as well as a clinician from Harrington to be able to support these students in social emotional learning. This program is a little bit different because it's competency-based. It is aligned to the Common Core and the frameworks. What we have done is we've formed a partnership with Boston Day and Evening Academy in Boston, and as well as Summit Learning. They're housed out of Rhode Island, and they have about 10 schools that are open in elementary through high school, primarily in urban areas such as Providence and Pawtucket. They have competency-based models, and we've been working with them directly to be able to create our program and meet the needs of our student population. What's different about this is it's more student-driven, and students take ownership of their own education, and that's done through goal setting, weekly goal setting, daily goal setting, and then keeping in pace with our students. What I mean by this is that there'll be a daily advisory period every day where the homeroom teacher will be their advisor as well as their mentor, and they'll be tracking the goals on a regular basis. And if for some reason the student is not on track, whether it's academically or emotionally or in their learning, they can help have them adjust their goals to meet the goals in order to stay on pace with the curriculum. The other piece that we like about the program is that it's no failure. So what I mean by this is, if a student is struggling within the content, that teacher will provide interventions for that student in order to make progress, and then once that student makes that progress and they receive that competency level, they're able to move on in the curriculum. So even though there's a sense of a year-long program and it's paced, if a student's not able to access it at that pace, they can pick up where they left off, instead of saying, I failed this year, therefore I have to stay back. This way here, they're able to access that curriculum throughout the year and into the next year. The way that it's graded is highly competent, which if you were to look at it from a report card perspective would be an equivalent of an A. Competent would be an equivalent of a B, and basic competency would be equivalent of a C. As I said, daily advisory we'll have every day with a student check-in, academic mentoring, goal monitoring. We're also going to have what's called a daily wellness program. Nikki talked about positive action. PBS also comes with some curriculum. We also plan to put in study skills, and as the students get older and progress through high school, you'll see career skills as well that'll be embedded in there. Daily directed study will happen at the end of the day. What's nice about this is the students will have access to their teachers and service providers, meaning the special education teacher, to support the student growth. This is how that personalized learning comes into play. The curriculum is set up in project-based learning. So what this means is they're going to be working on a large project, and then the teacher will be providing them the skills and the checkpoints necessary in order to have the project. In regular education, what you'll see is